Yo, what's going on, guys? And today, of course, we're doing the Phoenix Suns 2025 offseason recap. If it's your first time watching this, we're doing everything in between the draft, free agency, coach moves, whatever it may be. Jordan Knott's the new head coach. Brian Gregory's the new general manager. They have a new team, and they're out of the aprons. So let's talk about it. What are your thoughts on this squad? Can they compete for a playoff spot or not? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. And if you enjoy this type of content, hit that like and subscribe button. It'll help out the channel a ton. And go check out my work at hoopshype.com. Now, I do believe that this is a better team than you think. By the way, the number one three-point assister, basically who assisted the most on made three-point attempts this past season, was Devin Booker. Little stat you should know. Now, if we look at the current roster, I personally love the moves that they made. Khaman Maluach is a high upside big shot blocker, a guy who looks like he could be the lankier version of DeAndre Jordan, a shot blocking, rim protecting, lob threat. Now, he does have a high center of gravity, so it seems like he has really long legs, a shorter torso. I don't think he's already 250 pounds. I can't imagine this guy getting any bigger because of how his frame is not going to be huge. But if he can get solid, he seems like a guy who could be a pretty solid double-double machine. Maybe not the Giannis Antetokounmpo comparisons he was getting when he was playing in the BAL, but for someone who played at Kentucky, he is a great piece. They get themselves as well Rasheer Fleming, who is a power forward who can moonlight at the three and also be a switch big, who has a 7'5" wingspan. He can shoot the three-point ball, I think, at an above-average three-point rate. He as well as a better dribble penetrator and ball handler than people give him credit. I think he could be one of the bigger steals. And then Koby Brea, yeah, he has steel rods in his legs, but he was arguably one of the best three-point shooters in this draft class, and he could really have a Jalen Wells effect in this team's rotation. Obviously, he's not the defender that Jalen Wells is, but the rationale is that this team invested in shooting, athleticism, and size, and this helps balance out the core. They also brought in Portsmouth alum this past year in CJ Huntley. He's a guy who can play the 4 or the 5. I think in the NBA he's going to be more of a 5. This guy is a shot blocking menace, someone that I think was a very underrated player in the pre-draft process. Now, we mentioned it before. They brought in new leadership from the coaching standpoint. They brought in Jordan Ott. Out went they had Frank Vogel. They had Mike Budenholzer, who, by the way, Nikki, my fiance, or soon-to-be fiance, it just went to a concert of, my God, Poison Ivy Joy. I don't even know. I forget who it was. Kind of like an indie band. And behind her was Mike Budenholzer and his sons at Red Rocks in Colorado. Thought it was a funny story. Brian Gregory is a tiny guy. Brian Gregory might be 5 foot tall. I'm lying. He's not a dwarf, but he's like 5'5". Okay? He's maybe 5'8". Not that tall of a human. I felt like I was going to pick him up and be like, hello, tiny white man. Tell me about the rabbits. But, he helped reshape the roster direction, and they were able to trade Kevin Durant, which allowed them to do this major reset that led to them buying out / waiving Bradley Beal, who left money on the table to get them out of the aprons. It was a failed experiment, but they cleared cap space. This allowed them to add depth with younger and cheaper players. The Suns were able to do some salary cap gymnastics to try to build a new identity and got away from the old dudes. And I think they're still going to make moves. What does the roster look like after they did the trades and everything has settled in terms of the dust? Devin Booker, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Ryan Dunn, Mark Williams could be the starting lineup. They also brought in Nigel Hayes-Davis, who paid $1 million out of his own pocket to be bought out and be brought over from Fenerbahce, which is in Istanbul in Turkey, or Turkey, if you want to say it correctly. Now, he was someone that was offered Cam Johnson's house, but it was like $20,000 a month rent, and because of like his situation, he was just not trying to spend that. I actually was told that by someone. So he's someone that I bet he's betting on himself to maybe turn this into like a Gershon Yabusele got a $12 million contract. I'm not saying Nigel Hayes is expecting that, but he's probably expecting, I play well here, I get a rotation, I stay in the NBA. Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal are two guys to watch that could get traded because of their salary cap hit, one making $16.8 million and the other making $10.1. I'd rather trade Royce O'Neal with Nick Richards. I like Nick Richards, but he's the third string big. They already have Oso Iguodaro, Rasheer Fleming, and CJ Huntley, who could play those backup minutes, and Nick Richards could be flipped for some second round picks to recoup the picks you gave up to get him. CJ Huntley can also be converted if they wanted. They also have Isaiah Livers, who I really like, who's a floor spacing stretch four, could be a small ball five, but I really think he's a pure four who can moonlight at the three. They have Jordan Goodwin, Jared Butler, and Colin Gillespie as their true point guards. I think Jared Butler is the best one out of the three. Colin Gillespie is more of a defensive guy. I mean, actually, Colin Gillespie is probably their Swiss Army knife all around. Jordan Goodwin's more of the defensive guy. Koby Brea, by the way, is more of a swingman. So I like this. This team has a lot of wings and forwards. The biggest hole is they don't have a true facilitator outside of Jared Butler. Now, they're just under the tax line. They have about $1 million in room from the tax line, bringing their total payroll to $186.8 million. They have $8.5 million in first apron space and about $20.5 million in second apron space. Now, they technically have the dead money is of Beal, but like outside of that, they don't have any other dead money. So by shedding that contract and by trading Durant, they were able to escape the second apron, do some salary cap gymnastics, and regain the ability to use exceptions and trades and basically be able to flesh out this roster in a normal way. So they reset the roster. They gave up on the big three after three coaches, 2 disappointing seasons. They draft bigs and Maluach. They trade for Mark Williams, by the way. I forgot to mention that earlier. Bringing in Mark Williams is a double-edged sword because if he's healthy and he works out, Mark Williams could be one of the top 15 best centers in the league. They can sign him to a cheap contract that has injury protections laden throughout the contract. And that way it could also be front loaded so that if it works out, they can re-sign Mark Williams to a 3-year deal so that by the time his deal comes to an end, they could trade him and then re-sign Khaman Maluach, sort of like how Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu were developed and signed to contracts to coincide, the departure of Clint Capella as Onyeka Okongwu ascended into a starter. I could see a similar thing going on right there. And if it pans out, Mark Williams could, be a guy that they extend and then trade down the road. Look, they added Brooks, who joins O'Neal and Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen, which gives them 3 defenders, and we'll throw in Ryan Dunn in there. So adding Brooks with O'Neal, Allen, Ryan Dunn gives this team a lot more defensive toughness that they could also end up trading O'Neal and Allen because Brooks and Ryan Dunn can replace what O'Neal and Allen have done over the last few seasons. So having the financial flexibility by moving out of the second apron and the first apron was huge. So they were able to understand that they are probably going to have to regress as a team in total talent level in exchange to have a more sustainable roster construction. So why did they do this? Was it smart? They traded Durant because he wanted out. They got a return package. Yeah, it wasn't the same that they gave up, but it gave them cap relief and some assets in Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks that are actually win now players. They bought out and waived Bradley Beal because he was an unmanageable, untradeable contract that gave them cap flexibility by doing this move. Drafting Maluach gives them a long-term anchor potential and fits the youth movement. Why gamble on Mark Williams? They need a rim protection, and it's a low-cost swing that gives them 2 viable starting centers. Like, it would really suck if both don't work out. That would be really hard to do. But it's possible, but it's very unlikely. And do we trust Booker and Green being the backcourt? Devin Booker's a better passer, as we mentioned earlier, than you guys think. And that gives you 2 explosive duos. With Jalen Green has Zach LaVine potential still. And if this somehow works, the ceiling could work out really well. Yes, the floor is lower, but like, what else could they do? So why do they do this? What's the big picture we're seeing from this offseason? They chose to reset over doubling down for a third time over a failed trio. Booker is the franchise face. They committed and told him and re-signed him as the face of the franchise. He must be happy because it's nice to be wanted. They brought in Jalen Green to give him a guy who has all-star potential. They got themselves flexibility through doing some salary cap gymnastics by escaping the second apron to allow Phoenix the tools to retool. Now, there is uncertainty that remains. The chemistry between Booker and Green, 2 guys who play the same position, being your backcourt's weird. Mark Williams and Khaman Maluach, development and Williams' health will define how good this team's defense and interior is. They gave up short-term success for hopefully a long-term gain. The Suns may endure some growing pains and some losses, but they are better positioned now to eventually become a contender than they were with Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal being on this team. I give this a B. I think it's a prudent reset, but the execution hinges on Jordan Ott, who is credited as being a good developer of talent, developing the young core that they have. That's everything I had, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy today's video. If you guys made it to the end, hit that like and subscribe button. It would mean a ton. Ciao.